Hey guys, welcome back to the Lou Perez Podcast. My name is Lou Perez. If you'd like to support my work, please head over to thelouperez.locals.com and join the Lou Perez community. You'll get to listen to my podcasts and watch my sketch comedy videos before I release them to the rest of the world. And you'll also have access to exclusive content for members only. And if you're looking for another way you can support me, you can do so by supporting my sponsors. Black Organic Cold Brew. Just head over to www.blvckbrew.com and use promo code LOU for free shipping. And if you're into CBD products, please check out Paloma Verde CBD. Head over to palomaverdecbd.com and use promo code LOU for 25% off purchases over $75. All right, here we go. It's me, Lou Perez, and I'm very happy to be joined by Ankit Shukla, who reached out to me because one of the most important developments in modern memory has to be in regards to The Simpsons, and more specifically, the problem with Apu. So Ankit, you definitely have some thoughts on it. Right off the bat, though, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you do, and all that?
Yeah, of course. First of all, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It was kind of you to have me on here, so I always appreciate that. Originally, obviously, my family's from India. I was born there, but we moved to the States when I was a year old. So, basically grew up here since I was a small kid. Grew up in Nevada, Sparks, Nevada, and lived there until I finished college. I went to nursing school, and then shortly after nursing school, pretty much right after nursing school, I just said, I can work anywhere in the country, and so why don't I just take advantage of that? So that's what I did. I worked in a couple different states, and then I started travel nursing. Did that for 10 years.
What is that? What's travel nursing?
Yeah, so travel nursing, obviously there's nursing shortages everywhere, especially over that last year when we had that pandemic and we had certain hotspots in the country. But travel nurses basically go to different areas of the country, whether it's hospitals, clinics, and pretty much all different specialties where they have critical staffing needs. And a traveling nurse will fill in for a few months until the facility can basically get their regular staff filled up, and they'll be short staffed for whatever reason. They have a mass exodus, a lot of people quit. You've probably heard those stories about various hospitals in the country where 9 nurses all of a sudden became pregnant at the same time.
Oh, really? Was it the same? Was it the same guy? Same dude who?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I don't know. I didn't get into that story, but
it's a very handsome doctor.
But there's various reasons why facilities will go through a critical staffing need. Some are perpetually short, and that's when you look at it in that regard. It's usually a facility problem that causes people not to want to stay there very long. But basically, a traveling nurse will come in and fill in for a short period of time until the facility can get their own regular staff up and going full time, right, or part time, whatever they need.
So you're a person who deals with life and death situations. You help people. You are an important integral part to the country, the duties that you carry out. How did you get involved in the controversy of Apu and The Simpsons? And maybe you could talk about, maybe you could just maybe give a little bit of a brief recount of what happened with Apu over the past few years.
Yeah. So I mean, as a kid, I mainly grew up in the 90s, which when The Simpsons was at the height of its popularity. Haven't really seen it much since then, but
I hear it was also in the 90s. It was at the top of its game too. And then you have another 20 years of I haven't watched it either.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously Apu was a pretty not a main character, but a fairly major character, I would say. And there were a lot of as more shows went on, we learned more about Apu. He wasn't just that Quickie Mart owner with the goofy accent. We even as we watched more episodes, we learned that, hey, he came from India. He was an immigrant. He came on a student visa, I believe. He was highly educated in India at one of the top engineering colleges. He continued his studies in the United States. Couldn't find a job, or either couldn't find a job, or I don't know, for whatever reason, he couldn't work in his field. So he got a job as working at a Quickie Mart, became a Quickie Mart owner. And we learn also that he's a hardworking guy. He basically works nonstop. As the show went on, we learned that, hey, he's a good family man. He's a good friend. He's got all these great qualities. And on many episodes, he was really the integral part of the story. And so as we watch those episodes, we learn a lot about Apu and just his diverse background, his character. I mean, a lot of good character development, I think. And I think he's kind of, this is anecdotal, but I kind of think he was one of the more lovable and popular characters on the show. I'm just guessing based on what I've heard and what people have said about him. And so, of course, I certainly as a kid, I took my share of, teasing based on Apu. It's, hey, the funny accent, the this and that. But his story, what really I found interesting about Apu's story is that it mirrors a lot of the stories of a lot of Indian people, not just Indian people, but immigrants in general, people who were in other professions back home, and for whatever reason they couldn't continue. They came to America, they couldn't continue working in their field, whether they were a doctor, engineer, or another type of professional back home. So they basically have to, work whatever job they could to survive, but still create that American dream. That was really true of a lot of immigrants in general. So I think they did a good job capturing that aspect of Apu as well. And, the funny accent, kind of the goofy personality, a little, play on humor of some of the Indian culture. I just thought that was all done in good fun. I never thought it was offensive. My parents, whenever they would watch The Simpsons with me and watch Apu, they thought it was pretty funny too. And they really liked the way certain parts of the Indian culture were incorporated into the show. I think Apu, he went to a college called Calcutta Technical.
Okay.
Something. And my parents, recognize that name, like, oh yeah, hey, that's a pretty major college out there, I think. Yeah. So it's
So it seems like the real, a few years back, the controversy really came to a head with a documentary by activist comedian Hari Kondabolu, who made a documentary called The Problem with Apu. And for those of you who are familiar with my work at We the Internet TV, I produced a parody called The Problem with Bumblebee Man, which the bit being that, Hari had inspired me to call out the Simpsons on their racism towards Hispanics who dress like bumblebees. And there were a number of bits in the video that I mirrored, that we did exact parodies with Hari. And there's a particularly gross scene in Hari's documentary where 9/11 happens, and they do this really cheap effect where it's him looking at the camera and he's wearing glasses, and in his glasses you could see the Twin Towers engulfed in flames. And it was that moment, according to him, that he decided he had to speak out about Apu. So it's sort of like national tragedy inspires activist comedian to speak out about Apu. What was your take of Hari's doc?
That was very weird. I thought that was awkward how he was making that connection, and he was almost where it was kind of that offshoot that I was confused about, because he was almost, because 9/11, and you can't deny this, but a lot of people of Indian descent like myself that were working in convenience stores were getting attacked.
Right.
People of Sikh culture wearing the turbans, and people just ignorant people just don't know.
Right.
They're just attacking innocent people for no reason, and that was happening post 9/11 quite often. And and my parents, I was worried about my parents too, because they're kind of sitting ducks, in hey, surprise, surprise, my parents also owned a convenience store.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they were kind of sitting ducks in their own store. So I certainly had that fear that, hey, something was going to happen to them at some point. I wasn't so much feared for me because, you know, I'm not a tough guy or anything, but if it ever came to that, I feel like I could handle myself to a certain degree.
Right.
But yeah, it was kind of weird. I felt like he was kind of blaming Apu for the reason that a lot of those Indian or, you know, even Muslim people that were getting attacked in grocery stores or attacked in the convenience stores. I almost felt like he was blaming Apu for that to a certain degree. I could have that wrong, but that's kind of the impression I got from that. And I just, yeah, and it was very weird. And when that documentary came out, I was very confused. Like, wait a minute, Apu's a offensive stereotype. Or a racist stereotype. I never felt that. So that's when I watched the documentary. I heard people talking about it either on a radio show or podcast, and I said, "Oh, let me check this out." So I did, and I said, "Okay, well, it was a good documentary. I admit I enjoyed it, and he made some interesting points, but overall, I definitely disagreed with what he was saying." And so so I basically that's when I kind of felt like I needed to respond in my own manner.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And you did. You wrote a book.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And actually, how that happened was I actually, because I do my own podcast, it's like a motivational style podcast that I was also doing then. And I actually wanted to invite Hari on there to kind of have a discussion, or we could even have just our discussion on another platform, whatever he wanted. So I had messaged him on Twitter to, you know, see if we can make that happen. And, you know, I wasn't a name or anything. I'm still not a name yet. So it's like, whatever. But, you know, I thought it was a long shot, but then I got a message saying, you know, that I'm blocked for messaging the person.
Oh, really?
Or something like that on Twitter.
Were you rude or anything? Like, did you call him an asshole or anything like that?
Yeah. No, actually, I'll even send you the message I sent him if I can still find it. I think I can still find it on Twitter. I'll send you the message. I was about as polite as you can be, and I just said, hey, you know, Hari, I saw your documentary. You know, I enjoyed it. I really want to have a discussion with you. Let's, you know, do something. Let's either on my podcast or a platform you want to be on. And no, I was about as polite as you could be.
Yeah.
You know, basically just the same way I messaged you as well on the emails. And, you know, but basically I got that message saying I was blocked. And I don't know if he put that because, hey, he just gets a lot of messages and didn't want to hear from anybody, or if he personally didn't like what I was asking him. So I don't know, but I remember I got that blocked message and I said, okay, well, something clicked in me maybe a day or two later. I said, you know what, I'm an author. Hey, let me write a book countering his claim.
Yeah. And what's the title of the book, just so the listeners can go check it out?
Yeah, absolutely. It's called I Love You, Apu. Mm-hmm. And actually, I'm currently right now transitioning publishers. So I'm actually in the process of moving all of my books to my new publisher. So if anybody wants to reach out, is interested in my book, they can either reach out to me, and I can always, you know, they can get a copy from me directly while I have a few. And then once I have the book transitioned to the new publisher, I can let them know as well.
And what's the response been to your book? Have you received any invitations to come on a podcast and you're like, I got to block this guy? Have you had the same similar experience as Hari?
No, actually, I've had good responses whenever I've discussed it on the podcast, or to anybody else. No, my response has been good. I mean, I wouldn't say I've had like a mass. I mean, my book hasn't become like, you know, internationally or nationally famous yet, but you know, the responses I have gotten, you know, they said, hey, you know, you presented your argument very well in a, you know, respectful manner, and you know, I really enjoyed what you had to say. That's mainly been the response. And you know, most of the people who read my book have said, hey, you know, I really agreed with what you said. I normally don't agree with everything in a book, but I kind of agreed with everything you said. And of course, there were the people that were already in disagreement with Hari. So
yeah, well, I think one of the biggest criticisms that I made in writing, I wrote an article on for Spiked magazine. It was the first article I'd written for Spiked magazine where I plugged the parody that I made, but also responded to the documentary. And one of the criticisms is that there is a lack of interviews with people like your parents who actually run convenience stores, which to me just seems like the obvious, necessary conversation that needs to be had is with people who run convenience stores. And I know one of the charges is that there's a very strong like classist element here, where it's sort of like, it seems like Hari wants to get away from the reality of, working class immigrants, and the people that he ends up having conversations with are like either entertainers or other Indian Americans who are working in Hollywood or entertainment. But it's like, no, there are real people who who own businesses, who are working class. And I posit that the reason why you didn't want to talk to them is because they would say, well, no, we have like real shit to worry about. We don't care about Apu, or like you say with your parents, like, oh yeah, we actually thought that was cute.
Yeah. And it was funny because I of course there's a documentary and he wanted to get his point across. So I'm sure, I don't know if he ever at any point interviewed any Indian person that did disagree with him and they just left it out, or if he, purposely seeked out people that would agree with him. Obviously a documentary, it's going to try to be one-sided in most regard.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I agree with that because there are plenty of, and actually if you look at YouTube, there's plenty of Indian people countering him, small time YouTubers and stuff, countering Hari's claim and saying, hey, I don't know what you're talking about here. And it was really interesting because why he didn't have certain people from a different viewpoint on his show. And one argument I kind of made in my book was, the fact that one of the beefs they had was he was the only representation of Indian people. And when Apu came around, there weren't any Indian entertainers, outside of Bollywood. In the Western world, there really weren't any Indian entertainers. Now we have, several.
Right. And
I think a lot of them may have been inspired by being different than Apu. And, that's one thing, that, hey, you could give credit to Apu for kind of inspiring people to kind of go a different path. And, even Hari himself said, at one point, hey, I was watching Apu and I wanted people to view Indian people a different way. So he himself went and became a comedian. And so, that Apu in a way kind of inspired him to do something different with his life.
Yeah. No, that is interesting, inspiring him to do something. But it seems like he inspired him to become an adult crying over a cartoon character later in life. And I definitely, I've dug into Hari and his work, and in particular because of this documentary. And that there was a great thread I remember going on Twitter. It was from another Indian American whose parents owned a convenience store, and he found the similarities between his own dad and Apu, and just telling these amazing stories about what it was like to be a first generation Indian American, and the stuff that his dad went through. And I found it, and it made a lot of sense to me, and I could, I had a lot of, I don't know if it's sympathy or empathy, because my dad is an immigrant. My dad is a business owner. He owns a butcher shop. And those kinds of stories, like there's a reason why my dad worked so hard so we could become something that we wanted to be, right? So my dad would have loved to, if I had become a lawyer or a doctor. I think the lawyer thing is definitely the one that he always wanted me to become. Instead, I became a comedian and a writer. Actually, I want to ask you, like, did your parents ever give you shit where, like, you're a nurse? Why aren't you a doctor? Why aren't you a surgeon? Did they ever do that?
I mean, they certainly wanted me to become a doctor. They were happy that I was going into nursing because it's also a great, career path to choose.
Right.
They certainly wanted me to continue my education, to become a doctor, or something, a high level professional. And a lot of that, it wasn't just about money, but with India, like you said, there's still, even though supposedly the caste system is no longer there, the attitude is still there that, hey, the doctors and engineers are the cream of the crop. It's,
right.
But yeah, so they certainly wanted that, not just for money, but also I think, just for status, as a status symbol. But I mean, they've been happy with where I've come, and the fact that I've, even with a full-time nursing career and all that, I've still, become an author and a freelance writer.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're happy with where I am, and, married to a great wife, all of that. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, they've been happy. And, one of the things I wanted to point out, Lou, one of my favorite parts, and I've actually mentioned, first of all, I'm glad you brought that up about the Indian American who made that thread on Twitter, because that's actually one of the points I made in my book. Hey, if you have a problem with Apu, you have a problem with my dad, because his story highly mirrors Apu's story. My dad studied electrical engineering in India. When he came to America, he continued his studies. Unfortunately, the place we were living, the jobs just weren't that plentiful. And I think he was also kind of backstabbed by certain people that he knew, unfortunately, which, that's a story for another day. But, but he never could find work in his particular field in the area we were living. We could possibly move and find work, but at that time it was, hindsight being 20, at that time, it was not something you could really do, or didn't think when you're in the thick of things. It's hard to really think about stuff like that, because you're just thinking about making money, surviving, keeping a roof over your kids' heads.
Yeah. How big was
food on the table.
How big was your family at the time?
Just my brother and me and my parents, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And then so nothing major. And then but yeah, I mean, they did whatever they could to survive. We never, even with whatever they made, we never missed a meal. Always had a roof over our heads, and they never missed a bill payment, which is great. And I'm surprised they did that with the amount of money they actually made, which I learned later on in life. But yeah, I mean, nonetheless, I mean, my dad's story mirrors Hari's story very heavily. I mean, he would work in casinos or wherever he could find work. Eventually, he opened a convenience store, and we had a fairly decent life when he was. It was a lot of hard work, but we were able to survive on that for 11 years before they sold it. And with the selling, they were able to pay off all their debt, their house, and everything. So which was really nice. But yeah, I mean, but one of my favorite parts of the documentary was actually when he was talking to his parents. And I thought, I mean, his parents were very genuine, I thought. In the doc, especially his mom. I mean, his dad, I don't think really said anything, but his mom was, his mom was very genuine in the way she spoke, and it made sense what she was saying. When you're immigrants, or when you're just don't have the power, the connections, I mean, you do have to eat a lot of shit, excuse my language, but you just sometimes, in order to get ahead, you do have to kind of really bite your tongue and just keep moving forward until you can be in a position where you can where you can speak out, or or Hari, he's in a much better position than his parents. So I applaud him for at least understanding that, hey, he does have a platform, he's much better off, and he does have a voice to speak, unlike his parents. If, for example, if his parents had faced a lot of discrimination when they came here, which I'm sure they did, they probably did not have the voice and the power and the connections to speak out against it. They just had to do what they had to do to survive. But Hari is in a better position. I mean, the country's definitely progressed a lot over the years. He's better off financially, so he has definitely more of the power to speak against it. But I think I don't think Apu was really someone that needed to be spoken against, if that makes sense. I thought that was a very, like I said, I thought it was still a very appropriate caricature of an Indian person. I mean, obviously hyperbolic for comedic purposes, but nonetheless still a very good and diverse character.
Yeah, on the on the issue of being new immigrants, if you think about it, like, I'm 39. How old are you?
37.
37. Okay, so we're about the same age, right? So that means that when you came here, right? You came here 37 years ago. 37 years ago, right? That's would that technically be like kind of like 2 generations or something like that? If we take, like say 40 years ago or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And just looking at that, it seems like, every new group of immigrants that comes to the United States has to deal with, some form of adversity. So it's, when the Irish came, when the Italians came, and now, when the Indians came, when Puerto Rican, well, I don't know if Puerto Rico was, but when Hispanics came, having to deal with adversity. Not saying that it's right, but it's
Yeah,
sort
yeah,
of
of
like
course.
these growing pains that you have to deal with. When my dad came here, he didn't speak a lick of English, right?
Hmm.
And and my dad, being a butcher, like this dude was like sometimes literally fighting every day, literally having like fist fights because people
Really?
trying to take advantage of him because he doesn't speak the language well, and him having to assert himself. Um, but yeah, I mean, like you're talking like 40 years later, they're not only are we seeing more Indian representation in entertainment, but we're also
Hmm.
seeing more Indian representation in the population, right? The fact
Yes,
that
yes.
people will be going to a doctor and there's a good chance that their doctor may be Indian,
Yes.
and that's a really I think a really important important thing to keep in mind, especially
Yes.
for new immigrants who are coming here too. It's like like you said, you might have to eat some shit, and that's not right. But we can progress. We can come
Hmm.
get to a
Yes.
better place for sure. Um,
Yeah. And,
you
and
know,
going off the, oh, I'm sorry, go
oh,
ahead.
oh no, go ahead, go ahead.
I just wanted to capitalize on what you said about the Indian representation. I mean, can you go anywhere in the country, almost even in a small town, and not find a yoga studio?
Uh-huh.
I mean, guess where yoga's from? I mean, India. I mean, yoga is one of the most popular activities in the world, and there's different variations of it
Yeah.
now across the world. And I've seen things about wine yoga or goat yoga and all sorts of hip hop yoga. Yeah, so I mean, and then Indian food is becoming so popular, and
Well, dude,
people love Indian food.
yeah. Well, I got to say, like, so the first time that I
Mhm.
ever had Indian food, it was with my college roommate, Siddhartha. So Siddhartha,
Mhm.
and he had a twin brother. I forget what his brother's name was, but they were they were Punjabi, and they were
Mhm.
studying at NYU. And
Okay.
Siddhartha was my roommate freshman year. So I went out with Siddhartha, his brother, and a couple of his other friends. So Siddhartha and his brother were from India. Then his friends were Indian Americans, and it was the first time I ever had Indian food.
Mhm.
So the first time I had Indian food was when I was like 18 or 19 years on this planet, right? So for the
Right. Right.
first
Right.
19 years of my planet, I never had an idea of what
Mhm.
vindaloo was or a curry to begin with. I didn't know what a curry was, right?
Mhm.
And so even something as simple as that, I think, is a huge it's a big thing. It was a big thing in my life, to be experiencing something for the first time. And now I can't, I can't go a year without having Indian food. Are you insane? Are you kidding me? But it reminded me of something I'm really embarrassed about or ashamed. I think it's a shame thing, and it happened when I was a kid, right? So I wish there was a part of me that could let it go, but I'm very ashamed by this. And it's this. I was living in Woodside, Queens, so I was probably like 8 years old or something like that. And we were living in an apartment building, and it was Halloween, and we were trick or treating, going all the way to the top floor, and then trick or treating all the way down to every apartment.
Mhm.
And we went to one apartment, and it opened up, and who was there but an Indian family. So it was an Indian mom, and she had, I think, a little son or daughter with her, and she was so happy to be able to give candy out,
Mhm.
right? But me as a kid and dealing, yeah, I guess a little bit racist for a child, turned my back and wouldn't accept any candy from her because there was a particular like cooking smell that was coming through, and I was taught, or I don't know, I'm not necessarily taught, but it was sort of like in the atmosphere of where I was growing up that, oh, Indian smell or or that food is gross or something like that. So there was like they were like this woman was dirty and I couldn't accept her thing. And I was a kid. I was 8 years old. It was a stupid. It was, like I said,
Yeah.
ashamed of it. So stupid. But that sits with me because it's like, oh man,
Mhm.
even as a child, I was a part of this really
Yeah.
disgusting thing, something that I would experience myself with racism,
Mhm. Yeah.
for having a Spanish last name and being called, all these terrible things. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's something I would point out is, you know, uh, where technically, our ancestors are from very different parts of the globe, but yet in the United States, we have similar experiences just from the very
Yes.
nature of being, the children of immigrants or an immigrant yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing people don't talk about, and I don't want to make it like, because I mean, I would say 90+% of the people I've ever met in this world have been beautiful people.
You're very lucky. Hold on, I think we just froze for a little bit. We just froze for a little bit. If you want to just take that line
yeah.
again. Yeah. You
Sure.
said,
I was just saying,
yeah.
yeah. I was just saying, yeah. I mean, I would say, and I'm kind of a optimistic person, so if even maybe someone did treat me poorly, I may not have noticed or cared. But I'm kind of an internal optimist. I try to see the good in people. So I mean, I would say the majority of people that I've met in this world have treated me well, at least from my perspective, at least to my face. But of course, you get the people who treated others poorly. And one thing people don't talk about is, you were just mentioning, inter-minority racism. And I mean, I honestly, the thing you did as a kid, I don't really consider that. I mean, yeah, you were kind of a product of racism around you, but I wouldn't call you racist because you were a kid, you didn't know any better. So I mean, I would not call a small kid a racist. They're more of a product. If you got older and still had didn't change those viewpoints, then of course there's more of a problem. But I mean, as a kid, you were just a product of your environment at the time, which is unfortunate. But I mean, it happens. Like if I met a child of a KKK member, they're doing the white power salutes, I would not be mad at that kid. I wouldn't call them a racist, but I would be
what a shame.
I'd be, kind of upset at the situation they are in and feel very bad for them. And hopefully that they will grow out of it. I mean, my whole thing is, but I was talking, sorry, I'm going on all these tangents, but
it's all good.
But my whole thing was, inter-minority racism. People talk about white on minority racism, whatever that may be, and which is a huge problem. But there is a lot of inter-minority racism. I mean, you yourself, being Hispanic, you said Argentina.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know you've probably seen there's people from different Latin countries don't like each other in a lot of manners. People from different Asian countries don't like each other.
During the World Cup, I think it was 2 World Cups ago, I met up with a friend of mine he's from Argentina, and his 2 other friends who were from Argentina, and they refused to watch the World Cup in Spanish because all the announcers were Mexican, and they could, and they, well, no, but it wasn't because it's like they couldn't stand the way Mexican Spanish sounds. So instead we watched it in English, which was good, which was great for me because I don't speak Spanish fluently. So that was a, that was a positive for me. But it was interesting where it's like, really, you guys, it's like, oh man, it hurts my friggin' ears just to hear it. But that was just one example. I think Argentina has that kind of relationship with a number of Latin American countries.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you go to different, I mean, there's certain parts of the country, Latino people and Black people won't get along, or Black people and Asians, and there's just so much interminor, which is a shame. I mean, I hate all of it.
Yeah.
I'm someone that tries to love everybody, and you're probably the same way in a lot of ways.
Sure.
But just try to love everybody, but
love everybody or stay away. Like, just keep my distance.
Yeah. I'm not a highly confrontational person. I mean, I love to have conversations, but hey, if I don't like someone, hey, or they don't like me, then we don't have to cross paths if we don't have to. But yeah, it's interesting. It's been interesting. I think like people like you and me who, like you said, as we were growing up, we experienced a lot of the, maybe not so much hatred, but maybe confusion and all that came with being newer immigrants. And then when we see newer immigrants come from other countries, now that we're older, we can kind of remember those past times and change our mindset and say, hey, let's be a lot more welcoming to the people that want to legitimately come here and change their lives, create better lives for themselves and their families, and contribute to the country and make the country a more prosperous place.
Yeah.
So that's, I think as time goes on and we become more amalgamated, I hope that we can become a lot more like that, and continue to, I mean, we already have in a lot of ways, but I hope we can become that way even further down the line.
Yeah. With I think like the big problem with Apu, I think more than anything comes down to the accent. And I remember
Yes.
Hank Azaria talking about it, some years back, just saying like, it was basically like the thickest stereotypical accent that he could, that he could put on. And there seems to be, quite an aversion to that accent. And I one of the digs that I made that I made against Hari in his documentary was, this whole time in the doc, he was saying, nobody sounds like Apu. Nobody sounds like Apu. But then we watched the interview with his parents, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, they have pretty thick accents. One could say that they actually sound like Apu. And I wasn't doing it as a put down. Like
Right.
my dad has a really thick accent. Like with my dad, I'm basically bilingual in that I speak English and I speak my dad's version of English. So I'm able to understand. So it's a problem with a lot of people who meet him for the first time don't understand what he's saying, and he could get frustrated with that. But I love his accent. I love accents in general. I love trying to play with those with characters and that sort of thing. But like with Apu, it's like, why is it that if I were to put on a stereotypical French accent, like, that would be okay. That would be sexy even, right? But if you put on a stereotypical, like, that the kind of accent you would hear from an IT guy on the phone who's, coming from, from the Indian subcontinent, suddenly it's like, ooh, that's something to be embarrassed about. It's amazing how we just, how those decisions are made, or like what's a cool accent and what's not a cool accent.
Yeah. And a lot of people, like an Italian or British or like you said, French. I mean, they're kind of they're kind of considered more cool or maybe attractive. But I mean, I don't know I'm not sure what an Argentinian accent sounds like. I don't know if I'm sure maybe I've heard one, but I can't recall what it would sound like. But
my dad has his accent is very weird because he's from Argentina, but he's not from Buenos Aires. He's from San Miguel de Tucumán. So he already has a different accent than what you would find with someone for, I think they call like porteño, for someone from Buenos Aires. So he has that, and then his butcher shop is in Spanish Harlem, right? So for years, his big influence as far as people to communicate with Puerto Rican, right? So he's got Puerto Rican, but then over the years he has a very strong Mexican influence as well. So so it's an interesting mix. And when he and I visited Argentina some years back, I had sort of like a young kid who was kind of a guide to me in my dad's hometown, and he was studying English. So this was a great opportunity for him to, practice his English. And he was even trying to describe my dad's accent in Spanish too. Cause he said, it's like, yeah, like your dad sounds Venezuelan, but he uses Mexican words, so it's an interesting thing. It's just I think it adds a lot of flavor and color to, to the world and my experience. And I love it. I absolutely love it. But I don't necessarily know if someone would hear my dad speaking and be like, oh, that's a sexy Latin accent, because it's probably not.
Well, I'll decide after I hear him speak. So he still owns his butcher shop.
Yeah, he's kind of like semi-retired. I feel like both my parents, they really enjoy having things to complain about. Like that's a big part of their lives. So I don't think my dad is ever going to pull out fully from the business, because it's an opportunity, for stuff to be done that he doesn't like. It's like, why are they doing this? Why are they doing, why are they doing it like this? Like that. But it's also, part of who he is. I mean, he took over the business back in the 80s and built it up into a really successful institution in the neighborhood. And it's something I'm really proud of him for. This dude didn't graduate high school, And I think it's a similar thing like with the classist shit, where it's sort of like, oh, if you don't graduate college, then you're not to be respected. If you're not a doctor, you're not to be respected. It's like, fuck that, man. Like the people who run these convenience stores, they have stories to tell, they have knowledge, and yeah. So I'm a big fan of people like your parents in particular. So
Yeah. I mean, speaking of that, I mean, I read this great book a few years back. It's called like The Wealthy Barber. It's basically like a story about how different people go to their barber and basically get like financial advice and things like that from their barber. So it's kind of cool. And speaking on I Love You Apu, there's actually a pretty cool project I'm working on.
yeah, please tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm actually connected with a streaming service called Mobifi TV, and it's actually run by a friend of mine, founded and owned by a friend of mine who's also an immigrant, by the way. But yeah, it's called Mobifi TV, MOBFI-TV. If anybody wants to check it out, they have some great content on there. But yeah, we're actually planning a documentary surrounding my book, and I guess it's going to be somewhat of a counter, I guess, to what was Hurry's The Problem with Apu. Yeah, so it's going to be somewhat of a counter to that documentary. So we're going to start filming things this summer. I don't know exactly when it's going to be completed, but hey, I might be in the Brooklyn area or New York area. So if you want to be in the part of the documentary,
Dude,
do an interview or something.
I would love to do it. Love to do
Maybe we could do it at your dad's butcher shop.
that would be cool. Yeah, that would be that would be a lot of fun. Although I don't want to, he is a butcher, so there's a lot of beef, and I don't want to offend, any Hindus, who might be like,
oh, no.
This is a travesty. How could you do this?
No. We'll be good.
Yeah. With do you still have connections to family back home, back in India itself, or?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, there's my mom's aunt and a couple others, but it's more so my mom keeps in touch, not so much me. But my mom's older sister, my aunt, is there.
Yeah, I have a good friend named Samir, and he's in California, and he's been taking care of his grandfather who's ill, and Samir every now and then will sort of check in with me about stuff happening in India, and as a nurse, I mean, what India is going through right now with COVID is, I mean, and I just hear it through the news, but like, my God, these numbers are just unreal. It's just insane.
From what I understand, I mean, a lot of people don't even want to go to the hospital because they're like, man, I go to the hospital, it's going to be even worse. Even people that have active COVID and are symptomatic, they don't want to go to the hospital because there's not enough healthcare workers to take care of the people. I've heard, not enough people to cremate those who are passing away. It's pretty sad. I mean, I'm glad that they're cutting off travel, to India, because it's necessary right now. You can't have that stuff spread again all over the country. And it's been, we already went through that last year.
Is it a new is it a new variant? Is it like an India specific?
I'm not really sure. I mean, I know about the second wave. A lot of people are saying it's it was due to a lot of the festivals that were going on, the weddings and things like that, and a lot of close quarters. I mean, India is very densely populated anyway, but so yeah, I don't know. It's pretty scary, but we'll see.
Yeah, my friend, he had told me that, and this is like some months back, way before this happened, where he said people were saying, I know COVID is something that rich people get. It's like a rich person disease. And I
don't even know what that's supposed to mean.
No, I don't know what that, I don't know what that means either. I think it's, I have no clue. But another thing I want to ask you about is this is only because you're Indian. This is the only reason what's up with Indian scammers, phone scammers? What's going on?
I don't know.
We need to do a documentary on that because it is in parts hilarious, but also, man, these guys they're obviously doing this stuff because they're getting people. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I get, I get a call from a guy with a very thick Indian accent saying, "Hi, this is Walter Williams." And it's pretty hilarious.
Yeah, I haven't experienced any of that yet, but you're actually the first person that's bringing that to my attention. So yeah, I'm wondering what's going
What?
on there. I mean, obviously there's a lot of Indian telemarketers. Maybe some people are kind of taking advantage of that. I don't know.
Well,
I don't
maybe.
know.
I mean, it would be something if every Indian in America was on a do not call list, where they were like, "No, those are our. We got to protect our people in the United States, but we can we can call everybody
Yeah,
everybody else." What else is happening? Anything else happening? So you're a motivational speaker, or how do you
yeah,
define that?
yeah. And I've done that in the past. I haven't really been too keen on that. I've mostly been focusing on my writing career
Uh-huh.
the last several years. So I also work as a ghostwriter.
Oh, okay.
So basically, I write books for other people. I've written a lot of ebooks. I've written a few books for some close friends that have wanted to share their story. So that's been very interesting. Yeah, so I love to, since I just love to write, I love to write books for other people. People that have always wanted to put out a book or want to write something but just don't know how to do it. So I that's one of my businesses. I work as a ghostwriter and a freelance writer.
Uh-huh.
So that's mainly been my focus over the past couple of years.
So this week I got my contract to write my first book. So the
Cool.
contract is being reviewed as we speak. Hopefully, I will get a thumbs up from the lawyer I hired to read over the contract. It's my first book. Um, what advice do you have for me? How can I write a book in 4 months? Basically, what do you
Yeah,
recommend?
my particular style is, um, I like to kind of outline the whole book, kind of like know what the chapters are going to be, and then kind of fill in the blanks. But I would say, you know, be very focused when you sit down to write. Use that time only for writing, and
Right.
you'll be amazed at how much you can get done if you're fully focused. Get rid of all distractions, stay in your office or whatever, wherever you decide to write. Use that dedicated space only for writing. And then whatever, dedicate certain times of the day or certain days of the week only for writing, and just pump out as many words and pages as you can during that time. And if you have free time, like you have an hour, let's say, and you have nothing to do, use that time to just sit in your office space and do more writing at that point. And just make goals, like make small goals, like, hey, I'm going to have X amount of chapters done by this date. I'm going to have X amount of chapters done by this date, or words, whatever you're going off of.
Mhm.
And then by this 4-month period, I'm going to have my chapters done. I'm going to send it for editing by this date, and so on. But yeah, just and then the cool thing about writing your own book, of course, grammar and spelling, punctuation, all that is important. But the cool thing is it's not like you're writing a college essay where you have to be worried about getting graded. I mean, you can kind of write your own book in your own voice. It's
Right.
kind of like your own.
Yeah, it's
So
the
treat
point
it
of it
like your
too.
own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, treat it like your own work of art, so to speak. Like I mean, it's not like when Michelangelo or when Da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa, it was like he did it in his own way. So think about it as your own Mona Lisa or whatever work of art you truly respect. So yeah,
Yeah. I
and
think
don't be afraid to do it in your own word and your own voice.
yeah, well, part of me, like, that's what I'm afraid of, is treating it like a work of art, is treating it like Mona Lisa, because the way that I operate and I write articles, or even when I write articles in particular, because my sketch comedy, I'm not as anal about it when I'm writing scripts, but when I write articles, it's like if I write 10 sentences, I have to reread those 10 sentences before I get an 11th. And then for the 12th, I got to reread the other. And it's like, I just keep going over and going over and finessing the language until it's done, until I'm happy with it. And I know that that method works because I've used it, and I have proof that it works, and the people who've, published my stuff. But I'm just thinking about, man, the amount of time spent basically kind of having, like, being obsessive compulsive about sentences, and where I hopefully when I get started on writing it, that might be like this month, I might do, I guess, what they would call a version of a vomit draft, which I've done for feature films, where it's basically structure it. You know, you have a basic structure outline, and then it's just sort of like page one, just go, don't even go back, and just keep going until it's done, until you have basically word vomit on in book form, and then go through it and finesse it. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, Ankit, I want to thank you so much for reaching out, for joining me here, and yeah, man, I wish you the best of luck with your writing career, and also with the new documentary. Like you said, if you're in the New York area, I would love to take part, even if I end up on the cutting room floor. I'm fine with that. And I'm really happy that you were able to share your experiences and the experience of your family. And, we were able to talk about Apu, who I think you really nailed it in the beginning, where, he's a lot more than just an accent. And there's there's a lot of great stuff happening there. And something that I wrote in the piece that I wrote about Apu is that, it's a lot easier to tear down a character like Apu than it is to create him.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I think the way things are going, more people are into tearing down great works than putting the time in and creating them themselves. Thank you so much for watching and/or listening to my podcast. If you'd like to support my work, please head over to thelouperez.locals.com and join the Lou Perez community. And another way to support me is by supporting my sponsors. Black Organic Cold Brew. Head over to www.blvckbrew.com. Use promo code LOU for free shipping. And if you're into CBD products, please check out palomaverdecbd.com. Use promo code LOU for 25% off purchases over $75. All right. Bye.